got 30 words for money, that's a culture that's going to pay a lot of attention to money. It's the words that are determining the culture. Okay. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Couldn't language be contributed to like interactive symbolism?
Yeah, exactly. Very good. The connection. You can start making a connection between this approach to culture and something like symbolic interactivism, which is very concerned about language, communication. Good. Nice job. Seeing that kind of connection there. Sometimes that's made consciously in sociology, less commonly in anthropology. Remember, linguistic relativity really, I'll call it superior warp, that's coming out of anthropology, which is the discipline closest to sociology, at least culture anthropology. Okay, and then we talked about sociobiological explanations for culture. What, according to sociobiologists, where does culture come from?
Instinct.
Instinct. It's part of our human nature. Therefore, we can expect to find these cultural practices in every society we know of. What's the term used to describe that? Where a cultural practice is found in every society we know of. Cultural universals. Cultural universals. None of these concepts are difficult. This is not complicated like the difference between reliability and validity, but there's a fair number of them, and you're just going to have to memorize them for this quiz. Okay, that's sociobiology. Any questions on that? I give a bunch of examples. That's the main concept. So I've just done a major review for quiz 3 coming up. Everything I just talked about is going to be on quiz 3. So everyone knows what's going on. So if you're not clear on any of that stuff, I'm happy to try to explain it to you. But if I don't hear anything, I'm just going to go on. Everybody's okay. It's important that you do well. You need to ask me if you're not sure exactly what's going on. Let's go to the all right, let's finish this conversation. All right, sociobiological explanations are saying culture is an instinct. It's biology, stupid. That's in back of culture. Now, obviously, this can't explain everything, or even the most things in culture. We need other explanations to do that. A half step, or maybe a full step, away from sociobiological explanations are something called ecological explanations. Here, once again, biology plays an important role. Culture allows us to adapt to nature. In other words, an ecological explanation is going to say this act of culture performs a biological function, but it is not an instinct, it is learned. Crucial difference between this and sociobiological. The sociobiologist, it's just part of our nature. We can't not do it. That's why it's a cultural universal. But for an ecological explanation, yeah, it's going to say it's there because it's doing us some good in nature. It is a biological function, but we learn it. There's an obvious example of it right now. Looking around the room, I can see every single one of you demonstrating using some activity, something that performs a biological function, though it is learned. What is it?
Clothing.
Clothing. Exactly, clothing. Is wearing clothing an instinct? No. Are there some societies which have gone without clothing?
Yes.
Yeah. Right? Remember, human beings are indigenous. That is, our species developed in what kind of climatic area? What kind of climate? The tropics, where it's 95, 98 degrees, 24/7, 12 months out of the year, and in that kind of environment, hot and humid, do you need clothing? Is it a disadvantage?
Yes.
It's hot, sticky, wet, you know? San Diego, it's been feeling like Miami, where it's hot and sticky. Clothing starts getting sweaty and uncomfortable. Is there an instinct to wear clothing? Take a look at your average 2-year-old or 3-year-old. Put a diaper on that kid. Try and put a shirt on that kid. And what does that kid do?
Right.
Pull it off. Run around without it on. Ew, it feels confining. I don't want to clothe it. No. Okay, is there an instinct for wearing clothing? No, absolutely not. However, clothing allows us to adapt to climate that our bodies naturally are not prepared for. Cold ones. Yeah, we've been able to move out of the tropics, which is where these bodies are designed for, into colder climates because of our use of clothing. We've learned to do that. That has made our species a highly successful one. We're one of the most successful species on Earth, measured biologically, because you measure the biological success of a species by the number of ecological niches it occupies. That is, how extensive is your species. Where are human beings found? Everywhere. We are right up there in terms of biological success with the cockroach. Yeah. It's where a cockroach is found. Everywhere? Everywhere. Okay. This is the kind of conversation you'll get with ecologists. They're thinking in terms of biological niches, but it all comes back here to the biological function, but it is learned. Let me give you another example of this. This is near and dear to my heart. Well, more near and dear to my stomach. Cuisine. There's an interesting relationship between the kinds of cuisine, more specifically the use of spice, and that culture's relationship to the equator. What's this? We're going to follow the equator. We're going to start off in Southeast Asia, equatorial Southeast Asia. Anybody ever had Thai food? Okay. Extensive use of what in the cuisine? Spice. Okay, let's move east from there. Let's follow the equator along. Now we're going to hit India. Anybody ever had Indian food?
Yes.
Extensive use of? Spice. Okay, keep going east. Now we're going to hit equatorial Africa. Ethiopian food. Anybody ever had Ethiopian food? Extensive use of? Okay, now let's go across the Atlantic, following that equator. Now we come to Latin America. Big duh here. Extensive use of what? Spice. Okay, now instead of following the equator, let's go north. Anybody ever had Swedish food? Swedish meatballs.
Yeah.
Bland. How about Russian food? Borscht. That's beet soup. Bland. How about English food? That's an oxymoron. Never mind. Fish and chips. What does that mean? French fries in our language and fried fish. Bland. North, bland. Equator, spicy. How come?
Because that's where the most spice is, because it's all grown in the tropical area.
Okay. Yes, that contributes to it. But what you're talking about is the biodiversity found in the, around the equator. And that's true. There's greater biodiversity around the equator. That applies to all plant life, not just spices. Second, in the temperate areas where it's colder, there are at least some spices, but they don't use them. Okay, good guess, and it probably contributes to it, but probably what else? Something else is going. Yeah, Michael.
Were the spices used to help preserve the food because it spoils quicker in the heat?
Exactly. Very good. Let's speak biologically. What we know is that any time you eat meat, you're eating higher on the food chain. That's a simple biological fact. There's energy loss every time you move up the food chain. That is, for example, it takes 10 pounds of grass to produce 1 pound of cow. It takes 10 pounds of cow to produce 1 pound of lion that eats the cow. You're losing energy each time you move up that food chain, which means it's always going to be more efficient in terms of energy to eat lower in the food chain. But as human beings that develop large brains, we need high quality protein, and that's meat. Meat is always, therefore, going to be in short supply because you're eating higher on the food chain, and in the tropics, as Michael points out, that stuff is going to go bad quick. 95 degrees, 99 degrees, 105 degrees, 24/7. You just killed the bunny. How long are you going to be able to eat that bunny in the tropics? Few hours. Now, because meat is in scarce supply and you need it vitally for these large brains we've got, you're going to have to make use of marginally rotted meat. It's not going to kill you to eat it. It's just not going to taste very good. So how do you deal with that efficiently? Spice it up. Making an efficient use of a
Learned function.
biological necessity. Okay, any questions about ecological explanations for culture? Okay, let's talk about functionalist and conflict theory. I'll go through these a little quicker just because we've spoken fairly extensively about them. Remember, a functionalist explanation is often looking and explaining practices based on the functions they perform to ensure social order and stability. Social order, not biological. Yes, functionalists share with ecological explanations a concern about function, but instead of biological function, it is a social function. For example, and often, the focus of culture is around the most important cultural institutions that teach us our values, norms, mores, beliefs. An institution like the family. Remember Davis's explanation for prostitution? Davis, a functionalist. Why are there prostitutes? Because it protects the family. There's an interesting debate between functionalists and social biologists around what's called the incest taboo. The incest taboo is a cultural universal. It is found in every society we know of. An incest taboo says you shall not reproduce or marry or that kind of thing with members of your immediate family. And the social biologists argue because it's a cultural universal found in every society, it is an instinct. And the functionalists say, no. One, they say there's enough violations of this that it's surely not an instinct. Two, more interesting to the functionalist is that this universal is not following biology. What I mean by the following. Yes, every society has an incest taboo. But does every society have the same incest taboo? No. Who you can marry and reproduce with varies dramatically between society and society. That can't be biology. I mean, biology is biology. That's the kind of point. You know, the closer you are genetically to somebody else, the greater the risk of some kind of problem with your reproduction. Okay, but what happens with this variety is that the incest taboo reflects not so much the biology, but it is there because it protects what? Family. Remember, there's no such thing as the family. There are dozens, maybe 100 different kinds of families. Take a class in cultural anthropology. For example, we are in our family structures are by and large monogamous, nuclear families. Is that the only kind of family there is? No. Are there families which are based on polygamy? Interestingly, is polygamy, that is more than one marital partner, more common than monogamy, at least in terms of the cultural ideal?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Some form of polygamy is more common, at least in the ideal, across many cultures, than monogamy is. Whoa. And some of this stuff gets really weird. I mean, some incest taboos say you can marry your brother or sister, biological brother or sister, but you cannot marry your fourth cousin. What? Does that make any